Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, we always appreciate our listeners and our viewers, but we never appreciate them more than when we put out a call for questions and it just turns into a tidal wave of questions for us to answer. We were hoping like, oh boy, well, hopefully we can get a show at least out of this. And it's like, oh boy, did we get 3 or 4 shows out of the questions? And there's some really good ones in here. So thank you to everyone who submitted a question. And if you don't hear it on today's show, don't worry. You'll hear it on one of the next 3 to 4 shows, I guess.
And I will say the first question did not come from a listener or viewer. It's something I saw on Twitter and I just grabbed. So selfishly, I threw this one in there. It's not theft if you admit it.
I don't think that constitutes legal advice. At least it shouldn't, but that's okay. Tony did not go to law school, neither did I, but I guess I walked past the law school more times than Tony did because I know that does not constitute legal advice. So let's start with this one from @JimMWeber. You only get to watch one more college football game before you die. Who do you want doing the play-by-play, Tony? I mean, there's some good answers, but man, to me, there is only one answer here.
I know your answer is going to be Keith Jackson.
Correct. Tony, guess what stadium the game's going to be played in?
Is it going to be played in the Doit in Bowling Green?
What was really funny was I was sure we're going to say the Rose Bowl, and I was going to say, no, Doit Perry Stadium in Bowling Green. So apparently we've been doing these shows together too long because we're completing each other's sandwiches. So, yes, Keith Jackson calling a Rose Bowl, Big Ten versus Pac-12, Pac-10, we're not going to mess with the Pac-12, Big Ten versus Pac-10. Let's make that happen.
My answer was Brent Musburger, and I completely understand Keith Jackson. That's the other answer. I think for me, Brent Musburger is almost as much a part of Ohio State's 2002 season as Craig Krenzel. If you think about all of the moments in that game, in that season, but also Keith Jackson was very much a part of that season as well. So I don't think there's a wrong answer. I was looking back at Brent Musburger and his career because I still think like him and Gary Danielson might be my favorite duo ever. But when Brent Musburger left CBS, he was fired. The guys that took over for him on his jobs. NFL Today, it was Greg Gumbel, and he stayed there forever and went on to very big things. Jack Buck took over for him on Major League Baseball, who's an all-time great. And Jim Nantz took over for him on basketball, on men's basketball. Like, this is one guy doing all 3 jobs, and then the guys he left it for went on to, obviously, Jack Buck was something much... He was great before he took over for Brent Musburger, but it's just the shoes that they had to fill, and the guys they had to fill them ended up doing pretty great. But him and Gary Danielson are really, really good, and a part of that 2002 season for me.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with the 2 thumbs up on Brent Musburger as well. That would, if you don't pick Keith Jackson, I think you're probably picking Brent Musburger. Just in case people are going, you idiot, it's Joe Buck. No, Joe Buck is Jack Buck's kid. Jack Buck was I always think of Jack Buck. There's a few Jack Buck calls that I always remember. The we'll see you tomorrow night after Kirby Puckett's walk-off home run in Game 6 in the 1991 World Series. I will always remember that one. Go crazy, folks, when Ozzie Smith hit the first home run in left-handed in I don't know. It was like multiple years, and he hit it off Tom Niedenfuer in the 9th inning. I think it was a walk-off home run in the 1985 NLCS. Shout out Kevin Noon. I'm sure that was a haunting childhood memory for Kevin Noon. But yeah, Jack Buck was a just absolutely legendary baseball announcer, long time baseball announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals, and then had a kid who also has done some announcing over the years, and once got traded for a Purdue-Penn State football game. So there we go. Tied it back into the Big Ten for you.
Didn't Jack Buck also have the radio call of Kirk Gibson's home run? I don't believe what I just saw.
Yes, I think so, because that was Vin Scully on TV, and I think it was Jack Buck on the radio.
the kids today, we talk about the kids today, will never get to feel and experience the joy of baseball on the radio, which sounds, you say it now and it doesn't sound so glorious, but back then it sure was.
Well, and I mean, it's still available, and there are still some great announcer teams out there, but yeah, there are not very many that have been around as long as Jack Buck was at that point, or Vin Scully on TV, or...
Who did you grow up with? I grew up with Ernie Harwell with the Tigers.
Well, I grew up with Bob Murphy on the Mets, and he had started with... Bob Murphy and Ralph Kiner had started when the Mets started as a team in 1962. It was those two guys, and Lindsey Nelson, who is another name you'll hear about in... he called college football way back in the day, too. Ralph Kiner, the former Hall of Famer for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And those guys were around. Murphy died in like 2003 or 2004, something like that. But he was the Mets announcer the entire time, and then Howie Rose took over for him. They've basically had two radio announcers more or less the entirety of their time, and Gary Cohen does TV for the Mets along with Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling now. But it was... When I was a kid, it was Tim McCarver and Ralph Kiner doing TV, and Bob Murphy on the radio. And say what you will about the Mets, and Lord knows that I have. They have always had really, really good broadcasts.
I grew up with the Tigers because Channel 36 in Toledo would air the Tigers, and it was Al Kaline and George Kell on TV, and then Ernie Harwell on the radio. And I just remember you could just leave the radio on during the summer, and Ernie Harwell would be... I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but like somebody hits it to somewhere in the stands, and Ernie Harwell's like, the man from Traverse City catches that one, and it's like, how do you know all of these things? But that was Ernie.
Lying to the fans. What a monster. Yeah, I was just about to bring that up, because that was one of my favorite Ernie Harwellisms, and I think I'm trying to remember how long he was announcing. I think I was up in Detroit for his last year or so in the real early 2000s. But yeah, he was just an absolute legend there as well. So yeah, that's you don't when we say they don't make them like that anymore, they really genuinely don't make them like that anymore. Where guys are the announcers for decades and decades and decades. It just doesn't seem to happen as frequently as it once did. All right, so next one. At PhillipsB58, this is a really, really interesting one. I'll be fascinated what your suggestions are here. But if you could make 3 renovations to Ohio Stadium, what are they, and why are you adding more bathrooms?
Do they need more bathrooms? I've never experienced an issue going there in the press box, although there have been some issues in the press box bathroom. We'll just say that and leave it at that. Honestly, I don't want to see too many more renovations of the stadium itself. I'm more thinking of myself, and I would prefer... One of my favorite things about going to Michigan State is their chairs in the press box have wheels. Something simple. Just put some wheels on the chairs, or get chairs with wheels. Either way, and just have some ease of the seats and the motion and the movement. And also, Tom, maybe 13-inch screens for each media person so that we can see replays, because if you're sitting in the front row, you can't see the TVs above you. And maybe some shades for those people in the front row as well, because you get cooked alive. So really, I think if we could just do those 3 things, I think would pretty much solve everybody's problem.
I was waiting for you to suggest basically making the press box windows out of the transitions lenses kind of material. So those...
Tribute to Jim Tressel.
Yeah, those noon kickoffs, especially early in the season, oh boy, you do. It's like an ant under a magnifying glass, and it is quite bright in there. My biggest one, and this is not one that's going to really help the 100,000 fans in the stands, but a bigger post-game room would be nice. You go somewhere like Penn State or Michigan State, as you mentioned. Those are places where they've just redone the press facilities semi-recently, and there's so much more space. And that's, the Ohio State football beat is unique in pretty much all of sports, pro or college, in terms of its size. And there are a lot of sweaty people crammed into a relatively small space. And it's not really set up for the modern media environment, but they can't really do anything about that because of where it is in the stadium. And unless they're going to take away some space from the players' locker room, which I'm going to guess that they're not going to do. There's not a whole heck of a lot of room for them to do something else with that media room. But that would be one of my choices. An actual bathroom underneath south stands in the photo area would be helpful, but I'm sure that's a winterization issue down there. There is just a porta potty down there, which that's fine. This is not something that ruins my game day experience. I've coached enough youth sports to have spent plenty of time inside porta potties at various fields over the years, and the porta potty down there is generally very clean and well maintained. So that's good. That is a 2 thumbs up porta potty down there. But if we're throwing things out, an actual bathroom or two down there would be nice. I guess is there a way structurally? And the answer to this is no. But let's just say that it is possible. Is there a way structurally to remove the posts from B-Deck? The answer obviously is no, because otherwise they would have done that long ago. It was not built to remove the posts from B-Deck. But, if we're kind of waving our magic wand, that would probably make everyone's viewing experience up under there a little more pleasant in what remains of B-Deck after they've replaced a bunch of it with suites and all that. But those were the 3 that I kind of thought of. But, I'm sure the bathroom lines are still fairly long during key moments during the game. Maybe more concession stands on C deck. Feels like there's a lot on the A deck field level, but not as many upstairs. Anything else for you?
Yeah, maybe the hot dog bazookas make them powerful enough to reach C deck. Because it's just the folks in A and B are getting all of the free hot dogs. I would say if you wanted to get rid of the columns, the posts, you would probably have to go like suspension and have cables coming down from outside of the stadium, holding it up like a suspension bridge. I don't know if that is how feasible, Tom. Crazy ask by you. What about just the surrounding area of the stadium? More things to do in terms of places to eat and get rid of this University Hall thing. What is that even? Morrill and Lincoln Towers, are even people in there? Turn those into a walking mall, if you will.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people who would want more parking around the stadium. I do like the fact that in addition to not having gone to law school, you've now also proven that you've never gone to engineering school, so that's good. I also have never gone to engineering school. Honestly, with most of these, it's kind of that would be nice, but maybe raise south stands up or the lower rows of the closed end of the horseshoe, so we don't you don't have to kneel all the time if you're on the sideline as a photographer. That's pretty that's a pretty niche request there. I honestly, they've done a really nice job updating Ohio Stadium over the last 20 years or so. You think about what it was in the 90s before they did the renovation to make south stands permanent. It is a very, very different structure. I think they've done a very nice job with it. I'm kind of at the point where I would like to sort of raise my hand and say, can I make some requests about renovations that happen to other places that we go sometimes, where the press room at Northwestern, for example. I know they're trying to build a new stadium, but boy, the visiting press room in Northwestern is not sufficient for the Ohio State beat, and there's a lot of schools around the league where that's the case. So I might try and save some of my renovation requests for other schools in the Big Ten rather than Ohio Stadium.
Is it because I think it's Northwestern where the media just all gets in there and we're all crammed in there, and then Ryan Day has to enter from the back of the room and get all the way to the front of the room, and it's like watching him go through this line and trying to climb around cables and cameras. It's like Catherine Zeta-Jones and Entrapment, trying to avoid the lasers, and it's like this coach is very nimble, but maybe clear a path for him next time.
Yeah, Maryland is on that list too. Maryland keeps doing stuff to their football stadium, and the visiting media room there still is very much only ACC teams come here sized media room. So that's another one that could use a little once over. Fortunately, we will be going there a little less frequently than we have over the last decade or so. So that's good. Next one. Speaking of Northwestern football, we had two different ones here. Two suggestions on Northwestern who might replace Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. First one from @Cam_37. He says, when is the press conference to announce Brian Hartline as the OC for Northwestern? I assume he means head coach. I don't think he would take the a slightly less than lateral move to offensive coordinator at Northwestern. And then from @Dr_Tubbs, why is Jim Leonhard the right choice for Northwestern? Tony, if you're the athletic director of Northwestern and you could only hire one of those people, which one of those people are you hiring?
Jim Leonhard is pretty interesting because we're looking before the show, like, where is he even? Did he go anywhere? And he's not really anywhere as far as we know. So, like, he's somebody that could come in and do it because he doesn't have to. You're not asking him to leave a job. You could come in and do it. Plus, he has no ties to Northwestern, and right now, no ties to Northwestern is a plus. You know, he's not tied to any of the hazing that went on. No blind eye, that sort of thing. So I think that is interesting. But I think there are a bunch of decent names. It's just, do they want to deal with Northwestern's academics? And people say, well, you can't win at Northwestern, but the coaches for the last 30 years, the head coaches for the last 30 years at Northwestern have won there, so you can win there. I think that's an interesting one, and if he's just waiting around, but I don't know if this is the job he's waiting around for.
Yeah, and I like your point about having Northwestern ties not necessarily being a good thing right now. Let me just preface what I'm about to say with, no, I'm not comparing these situations. These are very different situations. Okay, there we go. It's like when Penn State brought in Bill O'Brien after the whole Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky situation, where it was like a clean break, someone who was, not at all tied to Penn State really, and came in and had, sort of a fresh start basically for that program at a time when they really need it. This is not obviously anywhere near the severity of that situation, but you having someone who comes in from the outside who wasn't there's no chance he was part of this this type of situation at Northwestern in the past. That would be beneficial. I think Brian Hartline. I think the Northwestern job is interesting because you can win there, but there's not really an expectation. If Northwestern is not going to the Big Ten championship game every other year, I don't think it's torches and pitchforks time in Evanston. I think there's sort of a recognition of what that program is and isn't. And yeah, they want to go to the Outback Bowl, or they want to go to the Alamo Bowl or the Pinstripe Bowl or wherever they've gone in the past. Like, they want to win 7 games, 8 games. If you win 7, 8 games there, I think, every other year, you're probably fine. I think, that Pat Fitzgerald probably had a longer leash than most people in terms of that, because of his ties to the program. And if you're not old enough to remember, not only is Pat Fitzgerald probably the best coach in Northwestern history, he very well might be the best player in Northwestern history, at least in the post 1950 kind of era. He is one of the absolute. He's on the Mount Rushmore of playing and coaching there, so he's going to get a little more leeway in terms of what just pure wins and losses, but I think there's realistic expectations there, and that's also a place where you're going to make a whole lot of money. I think there's a decent possibility that whoever replaces Fitzgerald could very well be in that Bill O'Brien kind of mold, where you're there for a few years and then there's a transition, if and when they build that new stadium, if you haven't gotten things off the ground in terms of the program, that you may be in for another coaching transition in a couple of years, but you're going to get a whole bunch of money. You're probably not going to have a tremendous amount of stress there in terms of expectations compared to a lot of other Big Ten programs. And so that's, it's probably not a bad gig to take. There are limitations, as you mentioned, with the academics and all that. But, if you're Brian Hartline, why do you take this job? Like, this feels a little bit like when Jeff Hafley left for the Boston College job. And, you want to be a Power 5 coach, and okay, and maybe you can make it work, but if you're the Ohio State defensive coordinator and you're, viewed as this rising star in the profession, maybe you can set yourself up with a better chance of success. You don't have to jump at the first possible thing. So, I think if it's me, I would look. I don't know that Brian Hartline takes that job, but I think Jim Leonhard would be a pretty good fit there.
Yeah, and taking the first job that comes along. Like, remember Ryan Day being offered a Mississippi State job, and what if he had taken that? And because Urban Meyer's told his coaches before, and it's probably something that Lou Holtz told him, just wherever you're going, make sure you can recruit there. And if you can't recruit there, you're not going to be able to win. And obviously Brian Hartline would be able to recruit most anywhere, but if there's a limit on who you can bring in just based on the academic restrictions, then you're limiting yourself that way. So, I don't expect that to be his first head coaching job, so I wouldn't worry about that. And I think the question was mostly in jest, but we answer it seriously because we're professionals.
Not lawyers or engineers, but professionals in one very narrow field, I guess, in the most technical sense of the word. Yes. Next up, from at 2007 MLR, most fun potential playoff matchups / destinations after the CFB expansion. Don't say Michigan 3 weeks in a row. And I guess let's start with destinations. And, for Ohio State, where would you like to see Ohio State play? And I think that's it's the same kind of answers I think that we would give in terms of what non-conference series would you like to see in the future. I would love to see Ohio State play at Death Valley at LSU. I'd love to see, Ohio State in Tennessee, Ohio State and Clemson. All the places that Ohio State, some of the more storied or bigger venues in college football that you have not seen Ohio State play in ever or recently. Those, I think, are, Ohio State has a series coming up with Georgia. Ohio State has a series coming up with Texas. Ohio State has a series coming up with Alabama. So you get a bunch of those. But, I think those would be a lot of fun. And, in terms of other matchups, who would you want to see coming to Columbus? Give me anyone from the SEC in December. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and then those are all the same answers that we give every time we talk about this future. I also had any kind of playoff game at Rocky Top and at Tennessee. I didn't consider any non-campus sites. Like, give me Oklahoma at Nebraska as a playoff game, going back to the Big Eight. My first thought was Ohio State playing in a place they would never go, like Appalachian State or, Louisiana, where it's like you're playing in a stadium of like 30,000 or 25,000, and it's the biggest game in that school's history, and the fans are going to go absolutely crazy because you never get teams like this to come to your program. And this is a playoff game. So the atmosphere, it'd be a much smaller crowd, but it would be as thick and dense as any other kind of playoff game. So it's something like that I think would be pretty cool to go and cover and experience that, because we don't lower ourselves to going to small stadiums unless it's like a Maryland or a Rutgers, but I think that would be neat.
That would be neat. Yeah, we don't lower ourselves to going to small stadiums unless Jim Delaney got a bunch of bonus money for it, and then we're told we have to. Yeah, I go back to like the 1998 Ohio State at West Virginia game. Like, that was a crazy atmosphere. That was, it's a smaller stadium. It's not a place Ohio State has played a lot before. That, that type of atmosphere would be great. I don't think you're ever going to get an Ohio State at Appalachian State game, because that would require, at least under the current format, Appalachian State to be ranked 5, 6, 7, or 8, and then Ohio State to be below them. I think it's very difficult for a non-Power 5 type team to get a home playoff game. But man, Michigan at Appalachian State in the first round of the playoffs would be an all-timer. Sign me up for that. I don't think it's really feasible for that to happen, but man, if it could, sign me up.
If that last team if that 12th ranked team is a Power 5 team, they could end up going, but can a group of 5 or a group of 4, however many groups there are at the time, get into that 5, 6, 7, 8 range? That's a tough question, and you'd have to have a decent schedule and mow through that schedule as well.
Yeah, maybe. Like, I would be interested to go back and look at the year that Houston played Oklahoma and someone else non-conference, and had a couple good non-conference wins. Where were they, or where would they have been in the college football playoff rankings at that point? Could they have, if you have a couple good non-conference wins and you have a solid conference schedule and you run the table, you could potentially end up in that range. You're also at the area where if the Pac-12 champion is 8-4 someone, or the Big 12 champ, last year Kansas State was the Big 12 champion, and they were probably, the 12th or something like that team overall. Maybe you could see a team sneak in there, but again, under the current format, to sneak into the top 4. But even there, under the current format, that wouldn't be a home game. That would just be they would get a bye into the second round. So it would take a team really doing something pretty remarkable. But you've seen UCF probably be in that discussion before. You've seen Houston maybe be in that discussion before. There were probably some Boise State teams that would have hosted playoff games, like Ohio State at Boise State. Like, yeah, sign me up for that one. That would be a very cool kind of atmosphere, a trip that I'd really probably enjoy making, and definitely something you are not going to see under the current format.
Houston finished ranked 8th in 2015 that year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
okay. Yeah.
But that loss to UConn was
giant killers. UConn, the giant killers. Don't mess with Randy Edsall. That's good life advice.
Maybe future Big 12 opponents. UConn and Houston.
Oh boy, yeah. That's now I'm trying to remember if Randy Edsall was actually the coach there or if he was still at Maryland at that point. But don't mess with Randy Edsall remains good life advice, regardless of where Randy Edsall was in 2015. All right, so let's do one more. At Eric E. Nichols, top 5 seating sections in the shoe. I always think of some of the best seats I've had are either in the first row of C deck right on the 50, first or second row of C deck right on the 50. The Pitt game in 1996, I got, those like preseason student seats, and I was in like the first or second row, somewhere between the 45-yard lines for that 72-0 game. Those remain some of the best seats I've ever had there. And we have, at one point I got seats through some kind of a hookup through John Perennis, and I don't remember who it was, but seats in the row of chairs right in front of the wall at the front of B deck, where you're under the overhang. And again, they were like right near the 50-yard line, and I don't remember what game that was for. That was some 20-something years ago at this point. But I think they're considered the first rows of B deck. But those seats are real good because if it's raining, you're covered. If it's sunny, you're covered for a chunk of the game until the sun gets to a certain angle. If it's snowing, you're covered. You don't have anything in the way because the pillars are not really in your line of sight. Those are sneaky good seats.
Yeah, that was my answer because I got those same seats, and the year I got them was in 2006, and it was a friend of the Ozone, friend of John's. And so it was 2006, and I got most of them. I was not permitted. I was not given the Michigan game, unfortunately. But yeah, it was first row B deck. Got nobody in front of you. You've got leg room, and you're probably at the 45 on the north side, like that 45. And I mean, that was a heck of a season to watch everything in living color like that. As a student, I started in Block O, so you're like in the end zone, up in the end zone, or down in the end zone on the north side, because that's where the Block O was back in the day. It's just one, and it was in the north side. And then gradually you start to move towards Frat Row, which would have been, a little further towards in the corner. And then maybe I think by my senior year, I was out to like the 10-yard line or something like that, and always in A deck. But I've never sat in South Stands, never. I think the only time I've ever been in South Stands is for like a media day talking to players, something like that. I've never watched anything from there. I assume I've been up in C deck for a spring game or something like that, just because I think it's a great vantage point being up that high. You see everything. So I like that B deck thing. That to me was the best because, like you said, you're covered from everything. Nothing can get to you. Nothing can bother you. Nobody's in front of you. You don't have any. Well, back then there was no drinking, so there was no alcohol consumption going on at all. I'm pretty sure I never saw any, but you didn't have absolute drunken idiots in front of you, as Karen Holbrook might say. But yeah, those are some really good seats.
I had forgotten all about that whole rant. That is a moment in time in Ohio State history for sure. Yeah, I had Block O for my freshman year, and then I think we moved up to C deck every year after that, and ended up kind of doing the same thing where you sort of move gradually down and end up at the 10, 15 yard line, something like that. You always have a clear view of everything in front of you. It's so steep that, you know, the people in the row in front of you are not, even if they're standing up, if you're standing up, they're not in your way. And, you know, you can watch the whole play develop. You get that kind of all 22 kind of view. So if you really want to kind of watch the whole thing and be able to watch, you know, route combinations or coverages or any of that kind of stuff, that's a really good way to do it. Because, you know, being down on the field is great. And, you know, people in like the first row of AA deck or whatever, like that's cool. And you have a pretty good chance of getting on TV. And, you know, you have a good sense for how big these guys are and how fast they're really moving. But you don't have a great, you know, you've got players in the way, and you've got, you can't necessarily see the whole field. You get people in the way, and you don't have a great angle to watch everything happen on the far side of the field. So, you know, there are pros and cons to everything. I have just always preferred to be up a little more, which is why it's so great that I'm literally at field level now. So that is fun in its very own way. But in terms of, this is why on the post game shows so frequently I'm like, I don't know, why don't you tell me what happened? Because I didn't really see it.
The Block O, because it was general seating, and first people to get in there, you just go straight to the bottom. So if you want the absolute worst seats, be the first people in Block O, because not only are you very low and you're almost level with the ground, but you've got stuff in front of you, you've got people in front of you. So it was always like, we'll bide our time. We don't need to be there too early, and then you get there towards the top. Because I still remember that 95 Michigan game, and you had the same seats, I think, in maybe 97, where you're down in the end zone, like basically on the wall. And you, unfortunately, like Tim Biakabatuka came to us almost every time, but like you couldn't see what was going on the far end of the field. And I don't believe there's any sort of scoreboard at that point, a jumbotron or anything like that. But it's a hard view.
It is a hard view, and the additional joy of being in Michigan Stadium and being in row 2 or row 1 is the exits are about row 60, if I remember correctly, 55, 60, something like that. And when there are 100,000 joyous Michigan fans going down the stairs to try and storm the field, you're kind of going, it's basically the college football equivalent of trying to swim against a riptide, where you're just, I guess we'll just swim sideways so we don't get tired and get, sucked out to sea, basically, get pushed down onto the field. Yeah, there's a couple things that were suboptimal about that. Charles Woodson did score that touchdown in 1987 about 20 feet away from me. So, and you did nothing. For a certain... Never been a great open field tackler, Tony. You know this about me. It was a memorable experience, and front row seat to history, or second row seat to history, I think. But not a great moment in Ohio State football history, certainly. But great way to end the show, Tom. Good job taking us down that memory lane all by yourself. Anything else before we go? Any palate cleanser you want to throw out there? I'm trying to think of places I've watched games at Michigan Stadium. I remember watching a game on the roof of Michigan's old press box in 2001. There was a camera deck on the top of the press box, which that day was mercifully not particularly cold and not snowing or windy or anything like that. So that was not a great place to watch the game from necessarily, but I enjoyed the experience of watching that game much more back then than I did when I was a little closer to field level. So a couple of years earlier than that. And really, if you're on top of Michigan Stadium, you're really only about 8 feet above ground from the outside. So if you fall, you might sprain an ankle or something like that. Just drop and roll and you'll be okay. So that will do it for today's episode. I want to thank everybody for sending in questions. If we didn't get to yours, we will. We've got a few. And so, as always, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Talk to us there on the message board. Check out all the great recruiting information, team information. I saw Alex just posted some latest updates on I think the 2024 targets as we start to head into the home stretch of summer ending, and then official visits starting up again during the season. It's crazy. So find us there. Find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle and also facebook.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.